This next chapter is called The Student. At this point, I should explain what happened to me since the summer day when I last hugged my dear and wise professor and promised to keep in touch. I did not keep in touch. In fact, I lost contact with most of the people I knew in college, including my beer drinking friends and the first woman I ever woke up with in the morning. The years after graduation hardened me into someone quite different from the stuttering graduate who left campus that day, headed for New York City, ready to offer the world his talent. The world, I discovered, was not all that interested. I wandered around my early 20s, paying rent and reading classifieds and wondering why the lights were not turning green for me. My dream was to be a famous musician. I played the piano. But after several years of dark, empty nightclubs, broken promises, bands that kept breaking up, and producers who seemed excited about everyone but me, the dream soured. I was feeling for the first time in my life. And at the same time, I had the first serious encounter with death. My favorite uncle, my mother's brother, the man who had taught me music, taught me to drive, teased me about girls, thrown me a football, and the one adult whom I targeted as a child and said, "That's who I want to be when I grow up," died of pancreatic cancer at the age of 45. He was short, handsome man with a thick mustache, and I was with him for the last year of his life, living in the apartment just below it. I watched his strong body wither, then bloat, saw him suffer night after night, doubled over at the dinner table, pressing on his hand on his stomach, his eyes shut, his mouth contorted in pain. "Ah, God," he moaned. "Ah, Jesus." The rest of us, my aunt, his two younger sons, me, stood there silently, cleaning the plates, averting our eyes. It was the most helplessness I had ever felt in my life. One night in May, my uncle and I sat on the balcony of his apartment. It was breezy and warm. He looked out toward the horizon and said, through gritted teeth, that he wouldn't be around to see his kids into the next school year. He asked if I would look after them. I told him not to talk that way, and he stared at me sadly. He died a few weeks later. And after the funeral, my life changed. I felt as if time were precious, water going down an open drain, and I could not move quickly enough. No more playing music at half empty nightclubs. No more writing songs in my apartments, songs that no one would ever hear. I returned to school and I earned a master's degree in journalism and took the first job offer as a sports writer. Instead of chasing my own fame, I wrote about famous athletes chasing theirs. I worked for a newspaper and freelanced for other magazines. I worked at a pace that knew no hours, no limits. I would wake up in the morning, brush my teeth, and sit down at the typewriter in the same clothes I had slept in. My uncle had worked for a corporation and hated it. Same thing every day. And I was determined to never end up like him. I bounced around from New York to Florida and eventually took a job in Detroit as a columnist for the Detroit Free Press. The sports appetite in that city was insatiable. They had professional teams in football, basketball, baseball, and hockey, and it matched my ambition. In a few years, I was not only penning columns, I was writing sports books, doing radio shows, and appearing regularly on TV, spouting my opinions on rich football players and hypocritical college sports games. I was part of the media thunderstorm that now soaks our country, and I was in demand. I stopped renting and I started buying. I bought a house on a hill. I bought cars. I invested in stocks, built a portfolio, and I was cranked to a fifth gear. And everything I did it on a deadline. I exercised like a demon. I drove my car at breaknecking speed. I made more money than I had ever figured to see. And I met a dark-haired woman named Janine who somehow loved me despite my schedule and constant absences. We married after a 7-year courtship. I was back to work a week after the wedding. I told her and myself that we would one day start a family, something she had wanted very much. But that day never came. Instead, I buried myself in accomplishments because with accomplishments, I believed I could control things. I could squeeze in every last piece of happiness before I got sick and died. And like my uncle before me, which I figured was a natural fate. As for Morrie, well, I thought about him every now and then, the things he taught me about being human and relating to others, but it was always in the distance, as if another life. Over the years, I threw away the mail that came from Brandeis University, figuring they only wanted money, so I did not know of Morrie's illness. The people who might have told me were long forgotten, their phone numbers buried in some packed away box in the attic. It might have stayed that way had I not been flickering through the TV channels one late night when something caught my ear. And we'll see it in the next chapter.